Hey John, could you give our viewers a little background on you and the Kickstarter?
Hi there. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure to be on your show. My name is John Statz. I'm the author of the WoW Diary, which is oh my gosh, how do even describe it at this point? It's how we made World of Warcraft. It's I built half the dungeons in the original game, 90% of the non-instance dungeons in the game. And I wanted to talk about the process of development and kind of bridge the gap between fans and developer. So this is my first effort into that, and talking to the fans directly is another one, I suppose. So thanks for having me.
Can you tell us more about the process of building Molten Core?
Yeah, so Jeff Kaplan didn't have the go ahead from the producers. And the producers are basically, they're the watchmen of the schedule. They're responsible for the schedule. So they had the power to bless something and say, go ahead, develop it or don't. And Jeff kind of knew. I had myself and Roman was the artist. He would make monsters in his own time and just slip them into the build. He would make new geometry, new textures for monsters, and reuse an animation set. So it was only him doing it. So it didn't cost the animation team any time. And I did the same thing with micro dungeons. I would just make lots and lots of layouts of dungeons. And so I kind of had the reputation for being a ninja. And people learned how to come to me because I had permission to slip things into the build when I worked on my own time at night and on weekends. I was just jamming, absolutely. I was replacing we reused layouts a lot before I replaced them all. So that's kind of what I did on weekends. And because I had the license to Ninja from the producers, Jeff and everybody else on the team who needed something, they would sometimes come to me and say, hey, can you do this like real quick? It didn't get approval, but it would be real cool if it were there in the build. So Jeff came to me and said, hey, how fast can you do a raid dungeon? And of course, that's like something I can't resist, oh, I can do it super fast, and so he got Scott Mercer, who was on team 1, to actually script the dungeon. And I was building the dungeon. So officially, no one was working on the dungeon. I was getting my own tasks done. Scott wasn't technically part of team 2. So we literally just ninja'd that dungeon, and I had the layout done, built. I mean, it's a super primitive geometry. It's actually no big deal to actually build something like that in a couple days. But once I got it in, at least in a presentable state, the red fog saved everything. Everybody loved the red fog. So I actually didn't have to spend too much time on the art side of the dungeon. It's certainly not a museum piece by any standard, but I did it in once. We had proof of concept that, look, we're almost 90% there after a week. Then Jeff takes it to producers and says, oh, look at what John and Scott did real fast. And kind of, it's like an arm twisting type of thing where the producers are like, they don't want to be like real dicks and say, no, you can't do it in. But so that's how, the Molten Core kind of weaseled its way into the build before we shipped.
What other things got snuck into the game?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. Gnomes, trolls, the entire race. That was Roman. Roman was the artist that we'd call them Roman specials, where he would take the ghoul and he would modify it into like a Frankenstein type of monster. And I think we saw that in Strathholm. And it would use the animation sets of a ghoul, but it didn't actually look like a ghoul. It had different geometry. So I would say at least a third of the monsters came from him standing on top of somebody's shoulders, their work, and re-editing it and coming up with a whole different looking monster. Now, the familiar animations looked like ghoul animations. You could kind of tell that they were the fidgets of the ghoul and the walking of the ghoul. He couldn't do anything about that, but Yeah, so I mean, a whole bunch of the game. I mean, uh, entire systems, like the way the mini map got in. David Bray was just doing a satellite. Hey, it's kind of cool to take a picture of the entire continent, and it looks like a satellite map. And we thought, oh, we could use that for the mini map, you know. So that's the system that's just how things happened, because everything was just so we were so overloaded with tasks that the cool things that we discovered while we were working on, if we could do them in our own time, we could roll them into the build without any guff from the producers. And that was kind of the goal. But I mean, I could say, like, a third of the game was done like that. Just lots of cool stuff. Like the train, like the toy train said, somebody just decided to do that. And, it's not like that was that does not sound like I don't know for certain, but that doesn't sound like a prioritized task that we have to get this train set into the build. Somebody put it together, and then Eric Dodds saw that and said, oh my gosh, this is something that's cool. How can we get this into the build? Oh, we have dance animations. Oh, well, it'll cast a spell in a radius that everybody dances, and he just rigs it up. So you kind of get people behind your idea. It's kind of like a garage band. You play a tune, and if the other guys in the band are jamming to it, then yeah, that becomes the tune that you're playing. So that's kind of how we did the whole game, pretty much.
Can you tell us why the Naga didn't make it into the game as a playable race?
Yeah, the Naga as a playable race didn't make it. That had a lot of support from the team. In fact, that had team wide support, except the animators who were really in the know that said, "Well, how are we going to do the Naga with mounts? How are we going to do that with flying mounts? How are we going to do Naga with armor sets, armor pieces? We can't actually. I mean, the whole point of being, I played Druid. I was, world's first Druid." First Druid account. I played a Druid the whole time, and I missed being in Druid form, not showing my armor. Like when I got, players want to peacock their armor, they want to display, and you don't want to play a Naga. As cool as the Naga are, you don't want to still only have like 5 or 6, maybe arm pieces or something. I don't even think the arms would have worked. They would have had to redesign the armor sets. And yeah, we had a lot of plans for water. Like the Maelstrom was where I think Nazjatar was this underwater city. We were going to do an underwater city. Early on, we were talking about that, and Mark Kern especially was saving some time for special water effects. Like that's how we were able to do water effects. I think we were the very first game where you could actually have a free swimming character in 3D, where like Quake had it before, but the animation was a player running in place, and that was them swimming. Okay. And we didn't even realize, like, once we got it in, we got used to swimming. When we had a shot in one of our promo reels of a player swimming down to one of my, I built a shipwreck, and they just submerged this shipwreck. People freaked out. That was the one thing. The waterfall, they actually freaked out over a waterfall. They freaked out over the fact that swimming. We thought, oh, all the animations and all the, like the combat and how many people and how. No, people freaked out over swimming, and they freaked out over waterfalls. That was just what people were talking about. And yeah, we forgot that, oh, wow, we actually do have underwater stuff. So yeah, underwater was going to be a big thing. Our first expansion was going to be the I forget what it was, the South Seas, where it's kind of like Booty Bay flavor, because Pirates of the Caribbean came out, and we were all super stoked about that flavor. It's, I don't know, maybe it's a Southern California thing where it's all about pirates. They love pirates down there, and sure, pirates are cool. Yeah, I went with that, but we had to make Outland. We had to go with the Outland. That was actually a server necessity. Our servers were getting too overloaded with data in the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and we couldn't keep making more and more zones and just tacking it on. We actually had to either upgrade the server equipment or the make the code more efficient. So that's why we decided not to do another Azeroth for our first. That's why we went to Outland. Just that's why we didn't want to keep. Yep, server limitations, absolutely.
What features did WoW have early on that made it stand out from other games?
Well, streaming was the biggest and probably still is the biggest. Streaming meant you didn't have any load screens. The only load screens you get are when you go from one world tab to another, and that means a dungeon and a world, like the dungeon and the outer world. Those are two separate world tabs. They're like parallel universes. Think of it. Kalimdor and Azeroth are the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor. They are completely two different universes. There's no physical connection between the two. At least when I was a dev, the 10 years I was there, there was never anything. So the streaming was the big one. If we did not have streaming, we could not have zones that just ran into one another. We'd have to have choke points because we would want to control where people were crossing those boundaries. And it would have just been awful, actually. It would have been an awful world because, I mean, you've played the other MMOs where you freeze and you're in a new zone, and there's all kinds of aberrant behavior, training monsters to a zone, monsters not knowing how to cross over into the zone. And Joe Rumsey was our server programmer. He was showing us, look at this. The mob is on one server and I'm on the other server. I'm attacking it and I can loot it. And what we see is just him standing next to a monster, fighting it and looting it. Okay. But that proof opened up means you could connect all the zones any which way you want. You didn't have to have like how instants are triggers to teleport. You would have had you'd have to have a trigger to go from one zone to another. Trigger to go inside of Stormwind or out, or Orgrimmar or out, and that would have ruined all the flights. The flight node, as cool as those flights were, we couldn't have done that because that would have been weird. Like, you just pop in the middle of the zone in mid-flight or something. It would just be, I don't even know what it would look like. So streaming was the big one. And of course, Griffins we considered the Griffin rides and the what were the Wind Riders, the aerial taxis were the killer application that it immediately visually set World of Warcraft apart from every other MMO. The fact that you are looking down at a giant world, and it took a huge frame rate hit. But we had a faster engine. That was another big deal. Probably after streaming, the low system specs is probably as unsexy as that is. That was the killer application for World of Warcraft. It wasn't easy dungeon or painless deaths. It wasn't anything designed. It was the fact that you could target low end systems so that everyone could play it. So yeah, that's the secret to Blizzard games right there. Low end specs.
What was the process of designing a zone, and how did Metzen contribute?
Yeah, Metzen had his lore hits. He would call them his lore hits. He'd pull out iconic ideas that were part of the lore, part of the canon, and then we would say, okay, well, what else haven't we done? What haven't we done yet? And someone would come up with purple trees. I think Justin came up with purple trees. We had purple trees lining Campus Drive back in Irvine, and maybe that's where he came up with the idea. It's a good story, so let's just say that's where he came up with the idea. So you just pull out ideas. I pitched a couple ideas I got in the game. I got the let's see what Ashara. We haven't done a tide pool zone. That was kind of where that came from. The Blasted Lands, the Black Rock. When I was a kid, I went to Sudbury, Canada, and they had acid rain damage. And all the rocks there had this black veneer on them. It was weird. You'd look at it, it was mostly brown, but then there'd just be blanket of black at the top of all the rocks. And when I was a kid, I also knew that the meteorite had struck Sudbury, and I mistook the black as the rocks actually getting burned or charred for tens of thousands of years. I went, that's so cool. I pitched that idea to uh, Bill, and he'd go, "Oh yeah, we haven't do that." And he didn't like black. We didn't use like black. So we'd use it very sparingly because we wanted the game to be colorful. But that's where the black char from the black portal kind of came from. But silly little, just our experiences through life. That's what influences us. You work with what you know. So.
When designing zones, were flying mounts a consideration?
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, no. It was we had used facades. Actually, that's one thing I did in Cataclysm is I turned Stormwind was all facades. Like it was like a movie set where you would just see the front of the building and there's nothing on the roof. And all these buildings were just jammed into each other. And if you're going to have it flying, then you have to have rooftops. So that was kind of a pain in the ass task. It's very technical to weld all of these roofs together without moving any of Stormwind around because you didn't want to bump it. You didn't want to change anything on the inside. So it was very meticulous doing that. It was not the most creative thing to do. It took many months to do, but yeah, it took a lot of work. Yeah, yeah, it took a lot. That was the worst one. Stormwind by far was a Strathholm. We would just say, "Oh, you can't fly over Strathholm. We're not going to put the roofs on Strathholm." Yeah, probably, yeah. Well, Silvermoon probably had just flat out frame rate problems if you saw it from because it was portaled like Stormwind. So portaling is a way of hiding geometry because each of the little areas in the city are too busy. They would slow down your video card if you saw them all at once. So that's probably what happened with Silvermoon. Yeah.
How is the Blizzard level of quality maintained?
Yeah. One of the, it's kind of funny. I named my company When It's Ready. It's really a tribute to an answer Mike Morhaime gave me once when I asked him how does Blizzard do it that other companies just don't, because they obviously can learn from our process. I mean, we spent more time on stuff, and his answer simply is Blizzard self funds their games. They self publish. When you're the money guy, also you can delay shipping until it's ready. That's the secret. That gives you everything. So the mistake of shipping early, it's always forced by the money people either running out of money or they have obligations too. So these studios are almost always forced to ship something too early. And it's just the I call it the Faustian bargain between a studio and a publisher that you don't have the freedom to spend more time on something that's really cool and really explore something, or the freedom to kill something that's not working and move on. So Blizzard, they hide their mistakes because they can. Other studios would love to hide their mistakes, but it's when you got to ship a product, when you're under a contractual obligation to ship a product, you ship it. I mean, that's kind of really the only thing Blizzard does differently. That gives them the time to polish stuff. And it also, because you're self-publishing, you can foster that culture. It's a culture of polish, they call it, where as you're working, you're making it as good as possible. You can't push the needle anymore. That's when it's done. If there's no one else on your team or other team that can push the needle, that's when you ship the game. And that's only the time. You don't ship before that. So, being being crowdfunded by Kickstarter with my book is great because I'm going to make my next thing. I'm shipping it when it's ready. If it doesn't work, I'll kill it. And I'm not under any obligation. So that's kind of the way to do it.
So I guess the players owe the executives and decision makers a big thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh no, let me tell you, it's the when let's see, it wasn't Vivendi Universal. I can't remember who was the owner of company, but who owned Blizzard at the time. But they didn't want to give bonuses to StarCraft, and the StarCraft devs crunched harder than probably any dev team has ever crunched for a long time. StarCraft was incredibly paid. People were living there with like sleeping bags. I mean, it was horrible conditions. Like, but they didn't want to give bonuses, and despite the amount of money coming in, the lead, the executives of the company, the top 10 guys said, "We're jumping ship. We're going to abandon these properties. We're going to start up our own company, and if everybody in the company wants to follow us, then they'll follow us." And they were ready to walk away. They were getting their bonuses. They'll take care of the top guys always. But to make sure that the rank and file employee gets their fair share, they stuck their neck out. And that's the agreement that Blizzard has. Now, I obviously don't. That's just, a telephone story from one person to another person. But that's I think that's how it really happened. They were ready to walk away from certain fortunes with franchises that were just ridiculously popular, and they were ready to walk away for that just for their employees. So the management is absolutely part of the success in that formula, like the formula for the success of Blizzard. They've just got a great HQ.
What happened with player housing?
Yeah, Animal Crossing was a big influence on World of Warcraft. It just opened people's, I don't know, it opened their minds to what could be done. Growing things, like you grow a plant and you get the apple days later, and maybe that's an ingredient or, I don't know, a consumable or something. So just the concept of waiting for something, the concept of anticipation was an untapped resource in gaming, and at least that I could think of before Animal Crossing. I think Farmville was doing the same thing at the same time. So that was an influence. Like the day and night cycle of the game happened to coincide. Just that's how Animal Crossing worked. They had an actual, they mapped their game's day and night cycle to the sidereal day. It was a 24-hour cycle, and that was new. So you borrow little bits and pieces from other games. I made some pitches with player housing. I wanted to do guild castles. I wanted any excuse to put castles into the game because World of Warcraft, I love castles. I knew so much about castles. I didn't get to build Shadowfang, and I was always bumming about not being able to build Shadowfang. But yeah, so I was trying to get guild castles, reasons for guilds to compete with one another, if not in PvP, but like in a raid progression or something that would just award the real estate, and it would be actually real world real estate. I wanted each server to have like the top guild on the server having the best real estate, and that could just be like they have more banners outside. I had castles with components of turrets and different levels of windows that we've seen in like Clash of Clans or something like that, where there's instead of wooden shutters you have metal shutters, and instead of metal you have brass, that type of progression. And Alan Adham liked it, but it would take a ton of programming, and there's no other system that we could reuse. So yeah, any ideas that had a lot of programming time as one of their ingredients usually didn't happen. So that's why we didn't do that.
How did you settle on what would be on the login screen?
Yeah. One of our most prolific level designers, Aaron Keller, he also knew just technically. He was a great tech artist. They gave him the plum job of making the login screen, being the face of the game that players see before, and it could be anything. And this is where you don't like the blank piece of paper, because Aaron found out that everybody was pitching their ideas to him, and day after day, day after day, week after week, people would just come in and try to sell their idea. Metzen came in. I mean, everybody came in to sell their ideas, and he quickly became, I don't care. Whatever Bill approves of, he's the art director. Whatever Bill says, that's what's going in. He didn't want to be any part of the conversation. But it didn't seem to deter people from still selling their idea to him, trying to get him to visualize something. So at some point along the way, someone said, oh, put a dark portal. That's a key element. And it kind of makes sense. You're going into a world, you're walking through a portal, it kind of makes sense. And if you look through the original Dark Portal, you can see that the background behind the portal is different from what's inside the portal. Probably not a lot of casual players realize it, but just conceptually, it's kind of cool, but it's kind of hard to see. You can't see very much going on through the portal anyway, so that's like missed on a lot of people. It was just a horrible experience for Aaron. He and I were in the same office, so I feel so bad for him. Oh my God. I got to hear, Metzen came in once. He was talking about his Titans and just the cosmogony of the world and how the world was born and Aaron couldn't care less. He just it was late Friday night. He wanted to go home. And, I got to, hear all this cool stuff about the lore, but it was, not a plum job at all to do that. Eventually someone made Aaron didn't want any part of the decision. He wanted somebody else to make the decision. So someone else made that call, probably Bill and Metzen together. Yeah, they tipped the scales in their favor.
Speaking of Metzen, you had a fun story about him testing a dungeon near the end of the book.
That's a good one, because that's where we realized to give a kill credit to someone who's died. Originally in the alpha, if you died during combat and you killed the monster, like your party kills the monster, you didn't get credit for the kill. You have to do the dungeon again. And these dungeons, this is Gnomeregan. I don't know how many hours it would have taken to clear Gnomeregan in the alpha. Probably many hours. And Metzen was like a nervous wreck. I came in, it was late at night, and there was a conscious effort. Some of the HQ guys were like, to show solidarity, would like just play the game, like play test the game late at night while the devs were working, to show like some solidarity between the HQ and the devs. And it was just Metzen's turn to like sit in the hallway, and that's what he was doing. And he was like, dude, I'm so nervous. Like, my heart is pounding like a million miles a minute before doing this. I've never felt this way about a computer game before, because there's so much riding on the line to take down this, boss monster, that you had no idea how it was going to, we didn't know he didn't know what its abilities were. You don't go online, there's no guides to doing it. So, they wiped a few times and they finally killed him. And he died literally the second before the other thing went down, and he didn't get credit for it. He was so bummed out. He was just, this is awful. Like, he just couldn't believe how awful. Like, all his friends got that kill credit. He didn't get the kill credit. So now it's his job to twist their arms to do Gnomeregan again. And I don't think he played the alpha since then. Like, that was the last time he played the alpha. He was just like so bummed out. And I told Jeff Kaplan this, and Jeff was like, oh yeah, that really sucks. We got to change that. But until that really happens, you don't think of jumping through all the hoops to get that to happen. So, yeah.
What races didn't make it in the original release?
Yeah. Well, we talked about the Naga, the ogres were going to be actually. We couldn't figure out how to make female ogres to be an attractive option for not. Well, we also wanted our female players to play like the character that they wanted to play, and we just didn't know how. Like we just every like our female Tauren, which is they're like they were weird, like they didn't have udders, so it's like there's weird things, when you try to do the male female thing for everything. So, yeah, the goblins were too intensive. We wanted to do, I think, Undermine. Is that where the goblins? Yeah, I think that's their city. We wanted it to be Tinkertown, this crazy, but we didn't have tons and tons and tons of goblin assets. It was a ton of work to get the goblin homeland to be built. And yeah, the goblins, so that's why the goblins got cut. We were thinking that they could be a neutral race, maybe neither Horde nor Alliance, but and what was the last one was demons. Demons, we were thinking, this is before Warcraft 3 really solidified. Metzen was thinking demons were shapeshifters, like that was their like a ward of illusions or deceit or something type of thing. But they got a lot more brutal, a lot more brutish, and shapeshifting was so way more expensive. That's like doing another race. So it's a whole different animation set. So that's why we didn't do demons that way. Thank God. I love the demons the way they are now. So yeah, we that's, I think those were the main races. The Forsaken were on the cutting. They were on the cutting room floor a lot of times where we didn't know how we were going to do the Forsaken. And I think once the animators committed to, all right, we'll double our efforts and get the Scourge in, or the Forsaken in as, the undead race. That's probably why they made it, is that the animators said, well, all right, we're not gonna wimp out. We're gonna put the extra effort in at the tail end of the project and give them the animations that they all need for combat and dances. And there's just tons of, I think they started, in my book at the time when I wrote it, there were like 80 some animations for each player model. So like the male had 80, the female had 80 unique ones, and there was some overlap, but really not. You had to start over a lot of them. I think it went up to 96 by the time we shipped the game. So just tons of animations to pull off our characters.
What were the crypts under Karazhan for?
Yeah, we found out later on in the game that the crypts were part of the many areas in the game that we didn't need. We didn't need all that content. There's only so many items you could give to people to upgrade their stuff. And when we sped up leveling, we found out, and also if you're not doing it for items and you're not doing for experience, you don't need extra micro dungeons around a dungeon to level up while you're waiting for your party to form, like you're waiting for your raid to form. That was kind of the theory there. So I was midway building a lot of those dungeons. I mean, there's some cool areas, but most of them are half baked. A lot of editing needed to be done. They were just not necessary. There were just areas that there's no value to them. It would have been like, does anybody go to the Badlands gold mines? Okay, that's okay. I could have finished it and produced super polished micro dungeons, but there's just no point to it. I mean, all it would do is just like make more bugs in the game. So we didn't need it. So we cut them.
What was a Rune Master class?
Oh yeah. Well, when you're coming up with classes, there's a whole bunch of ideas you're throwing out. What are the classic tropes of what you could do? I can't say that they went as far as to come up even with a class mechanic for that. That it might have been just a name of a type of hybrid character of buffing class. I don't know. Maybe somebody had an idea. I'm doing an AMA with Kevin Jordan, who worked on all the abilities for all the characters. Friday on Reddit, so we'll see. He'd be a good person to ask for that. So yeah, I don't know. Like it's possibly that it was just a name, or just a meme that, oh, this could be our hybrid class. We went with shaman. We went like a rune master and shaman. Which word do we go with? Which is going to be cooler to the play experience.
One recent topic of discussion has been the time required to play the game during vanilla versus the time it takes to play now. Was the time requirement to play the game a consideration during development?
Yeah, well, we started out for 90% of the game, pretty much until Rob Pardo came. We were terrified that people were going to burn through content too quickly and then unsubscribe. That was the fear, that we had spent so much money and we played made this game that people would play through and then finish after 3 months. So we just made everything huge. We made everything big. That was that, and then Rob said, no, it's people they'll play alts. They'll play the raid game. He really sped up leveling, so that was kind of the driving force to making WoW so approachable at the end. Now, it was way easier to level. Okay, so like right now, they basically like start you at a high level. I mean, they give you experience practically. You can level so fast, I guess. I don't know. I haven't played WoW since Wrath of the Lich King, so I actually don't know what the state of the game now. But comparing that to the way WoW was when we were in vanilla, it took longer in vanilla. But comparing vanilla to its predecessors, it was 10 times easier than its predecessors. So that was, to me, that was the big difference. It's not between today and vanilla. It's between vanilla and what came in its predecessors. So, yeah, if there's too many conveniences, I really couldn't comment with any degree of accuracy because I don't play.
What was the feeling like after launch?
Oh, after launch? Oh, everyone was gone. Like launch day, I was one of 3 people who were at the office. Everyone was gone for pretty much till after January. We had a couple tweaks to the server code. The servers not working wasn't because of our code. There was a configuration problem with the hardware coming out of the manufacturer. So until we traced down that was the reason why our servers weren't running well, that was we had bad performance, and that's why we were giving away days and days worth of free playtime because no one could connect. I mean, it was just a mess. But once they flipped that little thing, the servers, they were overloaded. We were surprised by the concurrency, but yeah, I mean, we had like 90% concurrency. It was just nuts. Yeah, the worst case any MMO had seen was like 15 to 20% concurrency, and we say, all right, let's double that. Let's plan for 30% concurrency. It started up at 90%. That's why you don't release a MMO on a Thanksgiving holiday, because nobody has anything to do other than play World of Warcraft or play your MMO. So we learned not to do that. You release everything in the middle of the week. Tuesday is the day that everybody makes their patches. So, there's not a mad rush. It weakens the mad rush to your product.
What was the reaction to the huge player numbers?
No one cared. No one cared in the slightest. No one cared. It was right there.
Happy to be done?
There were, yeah. No, actually, not happy to be done. We weren't done. There were there was a there was a mudslide of bugs to attend to, and it was the realization that crunching wasn't over. It was the realization that this game is live. People are going through content, and we had to staff up. We had to grow while we were putting out, a million fires and listening to very unhappy fans, unhappy about no PvP in the game, unhappy fans about imbalances with broken quests or classes that can't perform. We had classes that weren't suited for party play. Nobody wanted a shadow priest; they wanted a healer. If you're a shadow priest, go away. So there's a lot of unhappiness. I mean, it's kind of a bummer to say this, but like the morale was pretty low after shipping WoW. It was kind of down. So a lot of people left. It's not a fun time.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I think we're in our final few days on the wowdiary.com. If you want to check out the Kickstarter, it's doing very well. The Kickstarter version is going to be very rare. It's going to have some bells and whistles that the Garden Variety book isn't going to have. So check it out on Kickstarter. There's ebook and PDF versions too, and it's like a Big Mac Daddy signed version if you want to get if you got deeper pockets than than others. But yeah, check it out. Thanks for having me too.
Thank you.